Hey everybody, Ketwolski here, checking in with another one of our hashtag Star Trek Picard review discussions videos. Today, of course, we're going to be talking about Star Trek Picard Episode 9, whatever the heck this is. So before we get into today's episode, I want to go ahead and give you a quick overview of my reaction to it. Overall, I thought this episode was really fantastic. I know I had some kind of mixed feelings towards episode 8, but this felt very much true to form for the rest of this entire season, where it was very slow, deliberate, character-driven kind of stories where they kind of unfolded a little bit of the plot. And then, of course, we've got a whole bunch of answers and a lot of different intrigue and mystery kind of happening in this episode. So overall, this was an extremely solid episode, and I felt like it was a great first part to the two-part finale. So, like all my other review videos, of course, we're going to talk about the things that I really like, then we're going to talk about the things that I don't like, and then we're going to talk about the plot thread / theories that I have moving forward into our final episode of Star Trek Picard Season 1. It's crazy that we're already here. Okay, so the first thing that I really liked was the animation effect, the visual effect of the La Serena kind of going through the transwarp conduit. It looked really cool both inside the ship and outside of it. This kind of imagination of how this would actually look, you know, and kind of representing that to us as the audience, I thought was really well done. I thought it was really cool. So hopefully we get to see it again sometime in the future and it wasn't just a one-off thing. Another thing that I really liked, and it was really hard to get a screen grab of it because it was happening so fast, was the fight between La Serena and, of course, the snakehead-styled Romulan ship that Narek was on. Cool little fight sequence above the planet, and of course it kind of evolved into a bunch of other actions that were kind of happening, but I really liked the fight sequence here. I liked how they had the secondary cloak thing, which is kind of something that's happened in Star Trek before. We've seen that kind of take place in all different types of series, and we've seen the cloak being used to do all sorts of weird things, phasing in and out of, you know, rocks, aka the Pegasus and all sorts of stuff like that. So I like the fact that they kind of played with that a little bit. It wasn't just a straight up cloak there. It was a great kind of connection back to other uses of the device. Something that I really enjoyed during that fight sequence actually was when it appeared as though Narek was, I guess, kind of damaged and hurt inside of his ship, even though he wasn't. Soji was like, let's just leave him there to die. And Picard kind of gives her that, you know, that little bit of wise advice, you know, in this episode of saying there's a difference between killing an attacking enemy and watching a wounded one die. And I must say that I know I complained about this a bit in my episode 8 review. This episode, Picard is full on Jean-Luc. It felt like Episode 8 now feels even more strange to me as kind of like this weird anomaly that was shoved in between the character growth of 7 on Nepenthe and then this episode. Episode 8 now stands out even stranger to me because this felt like the natural progression from where he was when he left the Riker, you know, farm plantation house thing. And he's been much more, you know, kind of Picard-esque, you know, during this episode. And there's a couple of really great moments that we'll get into that I really loved, but this was the first of many in this episode that felt very Picard, and he's very much like that throughout the entire episode, which is fantastic. Obviously, I mean, one of the best things about this episode was the Borg cube coming through the transwarp conduit. Beautiful shot. Loved it. Loved this shot. It was so cool, so powerful. I was blown away. I did not expect that. I don't know what I expected at the beginning of this episode. Obviously, we knew the flowers were going to attack, you know, the ships and stuff like that, but I did not expect the Borg cube to show up this quickly, and boom, there it is. You know, there's, you know, I don't know. I don't know. It was really cool, though. Another fantastic shot here that I just loved, kind of as the Borg cube kind of comes in. I just liked how massive it is in comparison. You can kind of see at the bottom, there's two little dots there. That's the Serena and the Snakehead ship, and then the Borg cube, of course, is over the planet with the two moons off to the side there. So quite interesting. I really liked it quite a bit. You know, this was just a fantastic shot. Another shot that I really liked, you know, there's so many good ones over this planet, is, of course, the Borg cube, the Snakehead ship, and the Serena kind of getting enveloped by these orchid ships that, from what I'm gathering, definitely power down the ships, were intended to kind of help land ships from orbit onto the planet, you know, safely, relatively safely, even though it doesn't work out for the Borg cube, and somehow connect mentally to some of the crew, because we have that sequence with Picard where he says, "Thank you all for coming, everyone." So I don't quite know what that's all about, but that seems to be what they're up to, you know, but it's really kind of cool. Love the ship design. I thought it was really cool. Another thing that I just liked, you know, just the old school tricorder device. We have a lot of pads at the beginning of this season, and we've kind of transitioned a lot into the holographic interfaces and stuff like that for the majority of everybody else's stuff. stuff. You see pads every once in a while, but majority of it's holographics. But I like the fact that they brought out this old school tricorder device to scan Picard. It was really cool, a nice little touch there, and I like how that has like the little med kit on the table there. It was definitely something that Rios would have, is this emergency medical kit. So it was very true to character, and I like the fact that they put it in there. Another great moment for Picard. Again, he's acting very Picard-esque in this episode, as he divulges to everyone that he has his illness and that he is dying. And yes, he kind of shuts down any kind of conversation about it, but he also acts very reassuringly and then goes right into being the leader, that the group needs right now, that they've just crash landed on the planet. They're not quite sure what to do next, and they just got this terrible news about him, but he steps right back up into essentially the captain's chair, so to speak, and starts leading the team again and setting goals and kind of giving directions and kind of taking charge. And I thought it was just great. I thought it was fantastic. I thought that it was so Picard, and I love the fact that he's really gotten back into his shoes and really back into the uniform, so to speak, in this episode. It was fantastically done. I loved that sequence together. I mean, do I even need to say anything? It's Jerry Ryan, the 7/9. I mean, she's perfect. Another sequence, again, with Picard being Picard, just turning up that Picard magic this episode, is his very touching moment with Elnor, where he tells him to stay behind with Seven and help the XBs and help rebuild their little community on this cube and get the cube essentially ready to fight, which they're going to need it to do, here shortly. Hopefully it's ready to go. It was just another fantastic, very, very Picard moment, and it was very, very touching. And he didn't like hug Elnor or anything like that. In this sequence, they hugged when they first met up, but you could feel like the emotional connection there was extraordinarily strong. And even between him and Seven, they had a little bit of a back and forth earlier in the season where they were kind of over Free Cloud and stuff like that, but they had a much more stronger emotional connection here as well. And it was just very Picard, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastically done. Okay, so what's interesting about this sequence here is I did not expect there to be this many synthetics. I know I was theorizing in one of my live streams last week that maybe there was going to be no synthetics available, and that, Soji was going to be the last one and they were going to go that route. So they went the opposite way, and there's a whole bunch of them here, and they're all twins, and some of them are with the gold skin, which is kind of the, Noonien Sung style android, and some of them are kind of in the middle of that, and then others look kind of like just human. So it's kind of interesting to kind of pick out in the background of who's got what and who looks differently and stuff like that. So definitely rather cool. I felt like when they arrived here, it reminded me of that TNG episode where like everyone's like playing all the time. I think it was like season 1 or 2. I forget the name of it, but Wesley was there and they were playing with like the kids, and everyone's like playing soccer and they're like ha ha, ha laughing and like on this like weird, exotic fun party beach planet. That's what it reminded me when they showed up, which is cool. I like the kind of the callbacks there, but yeah, it was crazy to see this many synthetics. I was kind of blown away here, and I also like the looks here. Picard looks a little concerned, while Agnes looks a little like shell-shocked with how many there are. So definitely great acting between everybody here, and even the background extras trying to appear to be synthetic, and try to be androidish and being excited about who these people are and stuff like that. Everyone did a really fantastic job in this sequence. It's kind of a simple idea. It's just a bunch of actors kind of in golden makeup, and you got your main cast there, and they're just in a pre-built location, and they just dressed up the set, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening there, So for such a simple amount of effort, so many impactful things happen. So great job by the production staff on this one. I mean, again, just like with Jerry Ryan, it's Brent Spiner. It's Brent Spiner. I don't care how we're getting him back. It's Brent Spiner. I don't care. It's great. I love it. I was hoping that we would get Data, but this is an even more interesting character, I think. I should say more of an interesting twist, not necessarily an interesting character. We don't know much about his character. More of an interesting twist that it wasn't just straight up Data there. It was the son of Dr. Noonien Sung. The Sung family, they're just, you had the guys doing the augment stuff back in Enterprise. Then you had Sung making the androids here in the TNG-ish era, and now you've got a son redoing the work again. As much work as they put in, much effort they put into their work, they've always got time to make some kids. I tell you, the Sung family loves a good downtime, loves a good R&R. I don't know where they're finding all these beautiful women at to like all these kids, and it's a very limited gene pool, I think, because all of them look identical. They all look like Brent Spiner, but hey, it is what it is. I appreciate their commitment to a little rest and relaxation between all their hard work. So we get this cool new character who's Soong's son, which we've never heard about. Not a big deal, in my opinion. I know some people are complaining about this, of why we've never heard about him. Well, traditionally, Dr. Soong has been kind of a cryptic character. He's actually quite good at being cryptic. That's kind of part of his whole shtick. So him not mentioning this individual to anybody kind of makes sense to me in a lot of ways. But I know some people didn't like it. But to me, it wasn't that big of a deal. Again, we got a lot of great things here. We got Jerry Ryan, we got Brent Spiner, and we got Spot too. Now, obviously, this isn't the same cat, but I love the fact that they alluded to Spot and its connection to Data and all that stuff like that. I thought it was cool. Nice little Easter egg there for everybody, and I just thought it was great. I mean, cats are always a win in my personal opinion. This was a fantastic sequence here between Rios and Agnes. Now, their relationship has been a little tricky, I would say, throughout this season. They started off kind of like at ends with each other, a bit of flirtatious. Then, of course, right after she killed Maddox, they slept together. And then he kind of confided in her a little bit throughout the rest of the season in some regards. Then, of course, he found out that she's a murderer. And then they kind of split up from there. And now they're kind of having a touching moment. It's interesting, this kind of relationship. Now, a lot of people have stated that this is too much of a flip-flop. Like, why would he be interested in a murderer? What's going on here and stuff like that. And I feel like this is a very layered, complex situation where Rios is not just, a run-of-the-mill, straight arrow kind of guy. He's a bit of I feel like a swashbuckling smuggler-esque, and her being a murderer isn't that big of a deal to him, maybe, I think, especially considering that she was under the influence of this admonition, and she was essentially kind of pressed and forced into murdering Bruce Maddox. There's a lot going on there than just her feeling like it's okay to just murder people, and I think that Rios understands the different shades of gray that are kind of going on there, and I feel like he does have an attraction to her, and they have a bit of a connection here, and hopefully we're not going to get set up for Agnes dying, but we'll get into my plot theories later on. But this was still a very touching moment, and it's very complex. It's not super black and white. Like I said, some people are complaining about this, but when you really kind of look at the entire season as a whole and who these characters are and all the different kind of elements kind of going, being at work, specifically in this scene, it makes a lot of sense that these two kind of damaged souls would kind of connect in that way. So, I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was rather touching, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. So another thing that people I see online kind of complaining about is this sequence here where Raffi tells Jean-Luc, or JL as she calls him, which I don't like still, that she loves him. And, not in like a romantic way, but that she just, she cares about him and that she loves him very much. And she kind of has like a moment because she's still processing through the reality that he has a terminal illness. And Picard initially is like kind of awkward about it. And then he tells her, I love you too, Raffi. And a lot of people are like, well, why would Jean-Luc say that? That's not JL. That's not Jean-Luc Picard. That's not what he does. And it's for me, this is a direct connection to the conversation that we had in the previous episode between Soji and Picard inside the mess hall, where he is kind of still open to the idea of, him and Data kind of having a connection and loving and caring about each other, but he wasn't 100% sure about it. And that's probably because he didn't actually ever vocalize that. He even says in that conversation that he loved him in his own way. And then he's still unsure if Data loved him, which, I mean, makes a lot more sense because he's an android, but you kind of get my point. It felt like there was a bit of regret by him not actually sharing his real feelings towards the people that he cared about. And in this moment, it felt like that bit of a character growth where he's like, you know what, as awkward and as uncomfortable as this may make me, I'm actually going to share my emotions with the people that I care about. In this case, it's Raffi just reciprocating and acknowledging the fact that he does love her and does care for her. So I thought this was actually a great connection back to that sequence from episode 8, and really his kind of character arc as Jean-Luc Picard all the way from back in season 1 of TNG, where he's been the kind of the stoic-styled captain and eventually kind of warmed up and then eventually got more and more connected to his crews and individuals and people. And here it kind of culminates with him saying this to Raffi on screen. So I actually thought it was really great. I feel like people who have issues with it may not be considering the full context of why it is that he's saying that. So I would encourage folks to kind of keep that broader perspective in mind. Again, this show is very, very much connected in a lot of ways. So if you're only looking at it from this one scene's perspective, then you're probably missing the whole thing. You're kind of getting a little lost in the plot. Another very Picard moment. He had a lot of these. He just had so many this episode. Is when he's giving this very, very solid advice and kind of having this, kind of verbal sparring session with Soji about what Soji knows the plan is that Sutra has put together, but Picard doesn't quite know. But he knows that she's asking him questions that he doesn't necessarily have all the information about, so he's doing his best to provide very sound advice to her. Just a fantastic sequence. I really love this quite a bit. Another great sequence here is the, verbal sparring between Sutra, who is the other, Soong-style android that looks kind of similar to the Asha twins, and Picard, where, they're basically making a good point. Sutra... I'm going to get some ideas on Sutra here in a minute, but she's not necessarily out of the box. She's looking at it from a very pragmatic perspective of saying, I am concerned, and every time that, organics come into contact with too many advanced synthetic life forms, it usually ends badly for the synthetic life forms. It's a solid point. Dr. Soong's son, whose name I already forgot, but the other Dr. Soong, he also brings up the point saying, I don't want any more of my children to die. This isn't fair. This isn't right. And he's also correct. And Picard is also right to say that we don't have to just blow everybody up and go with this, admonition warning thing and let it go that direction. We can work it in another angle. All three characters are right. Now, definitely they're portraying Sutra as kind of more of a antagonist because she's more proactively trying to push the other synthetics of her brothers and sisters to making this decision rather quickly. But I would say that even if given enough time and Sutra was only to use her words, she would probably still convince the other synthetics that her position was probably more right, because I think that she does have a solid point that organics may not necessarily be able to be trusted. I mean, even look at Data. Data had to go on trial to defend his right not to be completely dismantled. And even at that moment, the Federation still didn't make a final determination. They still left it kind of like, well, I don't know what life is, but I think Data's got a right to survive, and I'm not going to clearly define it. And that was still like, okay, you still can't necessarily put a final definitive answer on it, and that's freaking Data, So I loved this sequence. There was a lot of good points from all the different sides there. And again, they're trying to paint Sutra as the antagonist because they're probably obviously setting that up for the finale so that we have some, somebody to fight against, But I like the fact that the moral arguments between everybody in this sequence was really well done. And this felt very Augments, like the Augment storyline from Enterprise, in a good way. Like, I felt like it was very much similar to, we're here and everybody just wants us to just die and go away because we're too dangerous to be left alive, and it's not right. And there's a lot of complexity to that, and the reaction to the people being hunted and the people who are hunting them are very important, and that is definitely something that's playing out here in this sequence. Obviously, we're not going to get the same kind of in-depth review on that style of storytelling because we had a lot of that from Enterprise, but it definitely felt like that a lot from this episode in a good way, and I like that, and I can't wait to see how this moral sparring kind of continues into the finale. This shot of the Romulan fleet warping towards their end goal, towards the planet, to go ahead and blow up all the synthetic life there, and I just thought it was really cool. I like the look of the new style warbirds. I haven't gotten a good look at the ones in the back just yet, but this is obviously kind of a D'Deridex replacement in my opinion, or the new D'Deridex. It kind of looks like a mixture of a Mogai warbird and a D'Deridex and a few other styled ships kind of morphed into one. I can't wait to see what the other sides of this ship look like so we can get more of a good view, but I just thought this shot was really cool. Okay, so that kind of wraps up all the good things that I liked about this episode. Now I want to talk about a few other things that I didn't really like all that much. So the first thing that I didn't really like too much is when Picard and company arrive at the crashed Borg cube. They walk in and they see a bunch of the XPs standing around, and one of the XPs calls out to Picard and says, Locutus, like he's calling out to him for assistance. And we had already had this kind of character arc way back when Picard arrived at the Borg cube when he was there with Hugh, and he was like, Hugh kind of gave him that prep talk and kind of, roused his spirits, and he was like, you're not Locutus, you are Jean-Luc Picard, you are who you are, and that's it. Like, there's nothing else to say about that. And there was a very rousing speech and a great moment between those two characters. The reason why I didn't like it in this sequence is, in this moment, instead of Picard looking like this, where he's like terrified again, I feel like the proper growth of this particular arc for Jean-Luc Picard would have been to simply and proudly state to this Borg and saying, I'm no longer Locutus, I'm Jean-Luc Picard, but how can I help you? Or whatever that, whatever that line is is taking ownership of the fact that he's no longer Locutus and he is Picard, and telling the XBs and letting them know that's not me. I am this person, and you too don't have to be that Borg drone that they made you. You can be a different person as well, who you were, or a whole new being, or something like that. I didn't like the fact that he looked shocked and afraid again, because it felt like we already resolved that in a lot of ways. I know it was kind of short, but the fact that he was shocked and afraid again kind of just annoyed me. I felt like it was a missed opportunity to really show more of that Picard growth that we'd had over the season. Another thing that I didn't really like about this episode, and this is a bit of a nitpick, I understand that, is I felt like they should have spent maybe another tenth of a second talking about the death of Hugh. Picard has this very wonderful line about what kind of, barbarity and brutality would have caused such a gentle soul to resort to such violence, in terms of, he's talking about Hugh. And then he says that, and then he's immediately like, well, what are those guys doing? And then Seven's like, oh yeah, they're fixing the vending machine. And then they just move on. And it was just kind of like, they could have spent just a little bit. It felt like there was more to that scene, and it got cut, and they edited it out a little bit. So I wish that they had left whatever the hell the rest of the conversation was in, just for another tenth of a second to kind of just share like a little bit of a pause. The editing and pacing between him saying that very touching line about Hugh and then asking about the vending machines was a little, I don't know, it was a little too close together for my taste. I mean, I'm sorry. This actor is a fine actor. I hate Narek's character. Hopefully we'll get something different in episode 10, and maybe he's got a complete 180 and he acts like a different person. But this whole storyline with him in this episode was lame, boring. I didn't find it very interesting. Of course, he's still in love with Soji, and he's trying to trick the other, androids into letting him out. And, he's still trying to, come across as like this anti-hero character. And he's obviously already preparing to betray the other Romulans. And it's just, I'm not interested. Hopefully we get something shocking, but so far his character throughout the entire show has been one long story trope, and it is kind of just lame in my opinion, and it stands out really badly because of the fact that everything else about this show is really, really awesome, and this particular character just is falling super flat. And it's and the fact that is I like Soji now more because she's away from him, so I think his character is just fallen flat for me. And I understand that not everyone feels that way, but I feel that way about this character. I'm just not interested in it. I hope that he sacrifices himself for some good reason at the end of this series, and we don't have to see him anymore in season 2. And that's nothing against the actor or anything like that. It's just that the writing didn't suit what they were trying to do with this character. It just kind of fell flat for me. Something else that I've kind of found weird is that this synthetic being, this, android, is dead because they shoved a brooch into her eye. Data got shot with a machine gun. He's been done all sorts of crazy things happen to him. And I'm not saying that these are the same style android or that they're built for tough, like the other Soong style androids. But the thing is it's bizarre that she died from just this little brooch getting stuck into her eye. I think it was kind of a weird thing. So I'm wondering if Sutra, who's the woman talking in the middle there, did something else to her and then stuck the brooch in her eye in order to try to make it seem like it was Narek's fault that she died. I don't know, but we'll see kind of what happens. I just thought that was kind of weird. Okay, now that we've talked about the things that I disliked and the things that I liked, and now I want to go ahead and jump into some of my plot theories for the upcoming season finale. So, one of the big things that happened in this episode was a lot of attention and focus on Picard's illness, about the fact that he is terminally ill and he is dying with the whole Irumodic syndrome. So, I think that they're trying to set up this whole subplot that Dr. Soong, this other Dr. Soong, and Agnes are going to transfer his mind into a clone body. They tend to spend a lot of time talking about mind transfers, building up clone bodies. He says he does bodies, and that Agnes kind of has the ability to focus on the mind transfer piece. So I think one of the things that they're going to do is transfer Picard's mind into a clone of himself, so that way he no longer has that terminal illness and he can continue on surviving. I felt like that's what they were trying to allude to by spending so much time focusing on his illness. I still do not believe, and although a lot of people theorize this, is that, Picard's going to die by the end of season 1. I do not believe that's going to happen at all. That would be craziness, beyond the fact that Patrick Stewart has said that he's coming back to film for season 2, but I just don't think that that would be a great idea for a show standpoint, to kill off the character who your show's named after only one season. Now, if they're going to kill him, it'll probably be at the end of season 2 or potentially season 3 or whatever it is. Definitely not yet. It's not going to happen this time around. I would be so surprised if that happened. I do not believe it is, but I do think that they're setting something up here with these whole mind transfer clone things. So one of the interesting things that happened here is Sutra kind of flipping the script and basically saying, I have watched the admonition. It was not, you saw it as a warning, humans, that synthetic life are going to destroy you. What it actually is there is these beings of synthetic life forms out there that are going to come down from the high heavens and protect all of these synthetic life forms that call for them and destroy all the organics in the area, essentially the quadrant, that could do them harm. And Sutra kind of takes that as, okay, this is our way out, because if we continue down this path that we're currently going down, I only see one eventuality, which is that either the Romulans are going to destroy us or the Federation are going to show up and shut us all down because they have this synthetic ban. Sutra's not wrong for feeling that way. It's actually a very logical conclusion. Now, how she gets to motivating, I guess you could say, the other synthetic life forms into agreeing to her plan to allow all organics to be destroyed by these beings on high is very lore-esque, and there are a lot of gold-styled androids kind of looming about here, and not all of them seem to be on the same page. Like, if you look at the way some of the other ones act and the way Sutra acts, it almost as if there's completely different individuals. And I understand that they are, and they have different experiences, but even this sequence here where Soji and Sutra are talking together, it very much felt like the ideologies of lore and data kind of going back and forth and arguing with each other about different perspectives and different ways to approach different topics, where lore always very much felt like there was a very definitive answer, that organics were bad and that we had to do very specific things in a very specific way, and there was really no other way around it, and you couldn't really think outside the box. Like, you saw a very clear path, and usually it involved hurting other people, whereas data thought of something that was a little bit more outside the box and a little bit more humanitarian-esque and a little bit more like, we don't have to hurt people, do we? And it was very, very two different ideologies, and it felt very much like that in this sequence between Soji and Sutra. So I'm still expecting a lore subplot to pop up at some point where they're going to say, oh yeah, we didn't get enough of Data's neurons to make all of these people, so some of these folks are Data's, and some of these folks are actually built off of Lore's body, which would be really interesting and a really fun kind of twist. And maybe Lore's even on this planet. That would be pretty wild as well. So that would be kind of interesting to see how that plays out. So the Serena did not go to Deep Space 12, which is what they were supposed to do to meet up with the Federation squadron, which, you know, Admiral Clancy put together to try to protect Picard and Soji and all of the rest of them from this Romulan fleet. He spends some time here trying to hail them from the planet, but with really no luck overall. I do think that this is just a way to kind of keep this in the back of the audience's mind, that there is a Federation squadron somewhere out there, and that even though he's not clearly getting through to them in this moment, it's very possible that they are going to pick it up at some point, or that he will figure out how to do it in episode 10, and then the Federation fleet is going to engage the Romulans over the planet and have like this huge space battle. I think that we are going to get a giant Federation versus Romulan space battle in episode 10, because that would just be awesome, and we don't have enough Federation ships in this episode, or really this whole season, so we want that. We want it! So I think that's where they're going to go with that. Something else that's really kind of important is I do believe that Picard, even though he's going to be on house arrest, is going to continue to try to motivate some of the other synthetic life forms over to his side and kind of work against Sutra. So I think we're going to have synthetic versus synthetic, and it'd be interesting to see if, the twins are kind of versus each other. Different twins are kind of going against each other, and different kind of disagreements happening that way. So I'm curious to see how the ideological battle, obviously he's going to continue his ideological battle with Soji, but I'd be curious to see if he also is able to motivate some of the other synthetics over to his more humanitarian-esque side, and kind of to see how that plays out. I can't wait to see that. Obviously we had a lot of great Jean-Luc Picard moments, and I can't wait to see that carry over, that motivating, inspiring leadership carry over into episode 10 to try to protect lives and protect not only everyone who's on that planet, but people out in the quadrant as well. So I'm very excited and can't wait to see how that plays out. Okay, so now comes the whole what happens inside of the preview for episode 10. One of the biggest things here is whatever the hell these tentacle things are coming out of this warping hole here. I have no idea what these things are. It looks like this is what's being called down by the device that Sutra and Dr. Soong create in order to call these synthetic beings from on high. and I have no idea what these things are. I'm wondering if perhaps these aren't the saviors that the synthetic life forms are actually thinking that they are. I'm wondering if this is maybe like a Superman Phantom Zone thing, right, where these beings were locked away and that they, somehow created some kind of faux warning thing saying, oh yeah, you call for us and we're going to come down and we're going to stop and protect you. But in reality, these beings were locked away and were trying to, some other ancient race kind of prevented them from escaping this kind of phantom zone type situation. So this device now actually opened up a rift that allowed them to escape. I'm just completely spitballing an idea. And then once they come through this rift, it's not going to be what anybody expected. It's going to be super bad news for everyone, including synthetic life forms, and it's not going to go at all the way that they originally thought it was going to. So that's just kind of a theory on my part. I don't know, something about these weird centipede tentacles doesn't register as these saviors on high that was kind of alluded to here. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. This is obviously the big reveal of episode 10, and really the big reveal of the entire season as to what is going on with the whole Seb Sheneb, the destroyer piece and all that stuff like that, and what that really means. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. One of the other things that we saw from the preview trailer was this shot here of Narek kind of popping up in front of La Serena, and he looks like he's trying to change sides, which we already knew. Boring, I'm not interested. Sorry, Narek, you just die already. I don't know, sorry. It's interesting to me that on board the ship, we get a shot of Commodore O kind of standing below the captain's chair of this warbird. And she's referred to as Commodore. She's given commands on the bridge and stuff like that. But what's interesting to me is she's not seated in the chair, which is actually elevated towards the back of her. So I'm wondering if this is a situation where perhaps another character may make an appearance. Maybe she's not the captain of this ship, or really of this entire fleet, and maybe this is where we'll see Sela return. I don't know, kind of a random theory, I know, but I just thought it was interesting that she's not seated in the chair, and she doesn't have to sit in the chair in order to be given commands, stuff like that, but I just thought it was interesting that they bothered to build the chair set and then have her not sit in it for this sequence. So I'm just kind of curious to see how that plays out. And the final thing that I really enjoyed about the previews is this cool shot of all the Romulan ships together, and we get that ship that Commodore O is on here, and kind of this cool green looking. It's every different more green than I expected it to be, and just the whole fleet all together. It just looks really cool. I can't wait to see these things in action versus the flower ships, and then potentially against whatever those tentacle things were coming down from space, or maybe even that Federation squadron that's supposed to show up. So I really can't wait to see these things in action. It's going to be really great. Okay, everybody, that kind of wraps up my whole entire episode review. We've covered all the things I liked, I didn't like, and all of my plot theories for episode 10. Again, my feelings on this episode were it was really, really fantastic. There were only a few things that I kind of nitpicked about, but really this felt like a very good, solid, initial two-part to the finale of this season. It's sad to see that we're already here, and I'm already of the belief that we are nowhere close to wrapping up all the storylines that they've kind of laid out in this season in a good way. It's very clear now that a lot of the plot threads, in my opinion right now, very clear that a lot of the plot threads that they've established throughout the rest of this season are going to be things that will be paid off in later seasons. They're not necessarily going to be paid off in this specific season, which is kind of interesting and kind of smart. I'm curious to see how this whole thing is going to end. I'm curious to see who those beings are, what these giant tentacle things are, but, and what they're going to do. I'm hoping we're going to get some Federation ships up here. Hopefully we'll get an Enterprise. Hopefully we'll get a Captain Worf or something like that. That would be really exciting. Kind of a brief little cameo at the end or something like that. That would be fun. But of course, I am curious to hear what you guys and gals think about this episode. Get your ideas and theories up and reviews up down below. Let's go ahead and get that conversation started, and we'll go ahead and see all of you guys next time. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies!